What to say when your boss asks for feedback. In my work with leaders and educators, a really common theme of questions that I get is, how do I manage up? When I'm not in a position of top leadership, how do I give feedback to people up there? Whether it's really positive feedback, or I don't totally agree with what's happening and I want to shift gears. And so in this video, I'm going to unpack a super tried and true classic feedback model with a very new, fresh lens that I think you'll really appreciate. So that model is the SBI model, and we'll unpack that quickly. And then the new lens that we'll have on it is a really cool lens given to me by a guy named Matt Church, and it's going to be the 7-17-37-77. Not nearly as complicated as it sounds. It's actually remarkably easy and has a whole bunch of other applications too. If you're picking and choosing whether this video is worthwhile to watch, a smidge of credibility, I suppose. My partner in crime and I wrote a book called Ask Powerful Questions, Create Conversations That Matter. And I would say that feedback conversations with your boss, with your leaders, what to say in those difficult conversations is deeply under our wheelhouse. And so I have spent more time than maybe anything else considering how do we connect across hierarchy, horizontally, vertically, and that communication, and really working to help leaders smooth that communication. And so the two frameworks that I'm going to share and unpack with you here are not things that I just read in a book and I thought might work. They are things that I have taught in the trenches with leaders and educators in a variety of contexts. And I'm psyched to share them with you because I know they'll be helpful because they've been helpful for a ton of my clients. Let's get into it. SBI model, super classic feedback model. I'm actually not sure what the original source of it was. If you feel really compelled to Google that, feel free to. The magic and the value in this model is it takes away 84% of the personal and emotional charge usually associated with the word feedback. Right? Sometimes we hear the word feedback and we put it together with the word boss, and we have a video titled, "What Do I Say to My Boss When They Ask for Feedback?" And all of a sudden our heart is racing. We're like, I don't know how to give feedback in this moment. Whatever that is, whatever that increased our heart rate, whatever is compelling you and inviting you to watch this video right now, is what SBI addresses. It takes rather than giving a feedback to a person, it's giving a feedback on a situation and the impact that it has. So let's go through this acronym, SBI. S stands for situation. A really great way to give feedback on any particular scenario or situation is to talk about what happened, right? Talk about the scenario, contextualize it, because sometimes when feedback is taken out of context, people then take it personally and say, oh, you're telling me that I'm a bad person, or you're telling me that I'm a good person. When feedback really should be a much more objective process of describing the context and how you were, because people change, right? Nobody's just good or just bad. I shouldn't say nobody, but I haven't met anybody who's just good or just bad, right? We are at our best in certain moments and we are not at our best in other moments. And so describing the situation, contextualizing everything so that your boss, your leader knows what you're speaking to, as opposed to just pulling feedback out of nowhere. The second letter in SBI stands for behavior. And this is where, once you've contextualized the situation, you're now going to go ahead and describe as objectively as you can your boss's behavior, what they actually did, and stick with, from an observation standpoint, what happened. So this is what I saw you do, this is what I heard you say, this is what happened, right? Describing that as literally as possible with no opinion, no judgment, no value of whether it was good or bad. You just describe what actually happened from your perspective. So obviously there might be a little bit of a bias in there, but as much as possible, leave judgment out of that and just describe the behavior. And then I stands for impact. So you've got the situation they're in, the behavior, the thing that they did, and then and this is the most critical, magical part of the model, I think, you're describing the impact that you saw that behavior have in that situation. So a constructive feedback example that might be useful here is pretend you're my boss in this moment and you're watching this video. We're gonna actually do this just live as if I'm giving you feedback on what's happening right in this moment. So, hey, you're watching this video and so that's the situation, right? Really super simple. You were watching this video about feedback, and then the behavior was, and I don't know where you're at right now, but either you were really engaged leaning in, and so I might say, oh, you're really engaged leaning in. It seemed like you were really tuned in and totally focused. Or, more constructive example, I might say, you're watching this video, but it was in the background of 5 other things, and you were also doing an email, and blah, 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 right? So describing that behavior. The impact is, in the first scenario, the impact was you were so deeply engaged in this video that you really retained this model and this framework and made use of them in your own context. On the flip side, situation-wise, you were watching this video, the behavior was that you were kind of distracted, and the impact was you didn't really remember much, and you kept giving lousy feedback to people after that. That's SBI in a nutshell, but that's not enough to give you exactly what to say when your boss asks for feedback, because I don't know your boss, and I don't know your context, and so the 7-17-37-77 framework is gonna be a really simple way for you to choose which lens to give that feedback. So these are ages that I'm talking about right now. So you'll have to adapt this for your boss and their personality. So 4 lenses with which you can put on and give feedback through. First is 7, as if you're giving feedback to a 7-year-old. Second is feedback as if you're giving it to a 17-year-old. Third is feedback as if you're giving it to a 37-year-old. And fourth is feedback as if you're giving it to a 77-year-old. Now in the first round, a 7-year-old is gonna have the attention span of a goldfish, and so you've got about 10 to 12 seconds. And so how would you condense all of your feedback into one sentence, which is actually possible with the SBI model? What's the situation? It might be a long sentence, but what's the situation? What do they do? And what is the impact that you observed? Super quick, keep it really tight. 17-year-old has that too cool for school personality, right? They have this deep need to belong, and they're still figuring all of that out, and this desire to be liked. And this is a lot of leaders and bosses, myself included at times, right? I think every human being on the planet has this desire to be liked, this desire to belong. And so 17-year-old, I'm really tuned into that. I'm recognizing that even if I do the most objective situation, behavior, impact sort of feedback, I'm aware that they might still take it personally, or they might have a tendency to take it personally. And so that 17-year-old, I might give them a whole bunch of love. I might build in affirmation. I don't recommend the bad feedback advice that you may have received at some point in your career, which is giving people a sandwich. In other words, let me drop some positive feedback and then share the negative bits and then end it with some positive. That's not how I would give feedback to a 17-year-old. I'd give feedback to a 17-year-old and I'd be really clear about my intention for why I was giving that feedback. That's how I would communicate that I love and had their best interest in mind, right? I wouldn't say, oh, you're really good at this, but you're bad at this, but you're really good at this too, because that just feels icky, right? That just feels like you're trying to cover up dog poop with sugar. It's not gonna work very well. 37-year-old, you gotta think, they might have a couple kids, they've got a whole bunch of things going on, they might be in a really intense point in their career, they're busy, practical. You gotta give that feedback in really practical ways, because they're listening for like, what do I do? What do I do? I'm down to change. I'm ready. I'm down to change. What do I do? What do I do with my hands? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And they're just asking that over and over again. So that might take SBI one step more. So situation, behavior, impact doesn't really leave people with a what do I do? It just is non-judgmental blank feedback. You might add an R to the end of that and give a recommendation. So I might do the SBI part really quickly and then focus in on the recommendation part. So here's the situation. Here's what you did, here's the impact that I saw have it on the group or the impact that it had on me. And in the future, I think that it would be really helpful if you blank and fill in your recommendation or your suggestion of how that behavior shifts or changes beyond that. And last, for 77-year-olds, and this, by the way, is, this doesn't necessarily need to correlate to your boss's age. In fact, it shouldn't. It should coordinate to what is the best mode of feedback, what will be heard best by your boss or by your peers. So for a 77-year-old, you have to imagine that somebody who has been on the planet for 77 years has accumulated some wisdom, right? They've heard a lot of stuff. And they might also not be particularly open-minded to brand new ideas. That's a total stereotype. I know that that is not true for a lot of 77-year-olds that I know. And recognizing that in this framework, it might be useful to think about that resistance to change as one possibility. But there's also probably a proclivity toward wisdom. You might use words like proclivity with them, right? You might speak in a way that just speaks to the depth or the heart of the matter, because by the time you're 77, you're not so interested in the fluff. You're like, let's get down to it. What is really at the core here? Can we not play these games? So you might speak your feedback in a little bit more of a wise format. Both the SBI and this framework are really great to apply in a whole bunch of different contexts. So feel free to not limit these ideas to only a feedback context. Would love if this branched out and became something else for you as well. You rock. If you've made it to this point, maybe consider subscribing to the channel. If you found something you liked, maybe like the video. I'm Chad. Have an awesome day.